For some 10 years, the business flying area has been overwhelmed by Boeing, and all the more as of late Airbus. However, it looks like a marginally less popular aviation organization from Brazil could be coming to take their lofty position. Skimming into the large player discussions is Embraer with their E2 series of jetliners, which aircrafts could be marching for in the not-so-distant future. Yet what is so unique about the E2 jetliner series? Before we get into the specs and advantages of the Embraer E2 flyliner series, we really want to momentarily find out about Embraer, its parent organization. Embraer is a Brazilian aviation company which plans, produces, what's more, sells a wide range of airplane counting business, horticultural, and military. On the off chance that you're not talking with airplane, you could have never heard about them, yet they're really the third biggest maker of business planes after the enormous two of Boeing. What's more, Airbus, they've likewise been in activity since 1969, which is north of 54 years prior. Presently added to this, they are apparently the main supplier of territorial planes, as well as the main 100 safeguard worker for hire on the planet. So they're not a little organization using any and all means, yet on the off chance that you don't live in the Americas or in Europe, you could be excused for not knowing much about their size. Embraer are particularly known in the business flight industry, known for their particularly planned airplanes, which all house under 150 travelers. The Embraer E2 jetliner series is Embraer's most recent this age of airplane, which are intended for medium-range activities. They're a subordinate of Embraer's unique EE-ET family, sent off at the 2013 Paris flying demonstration. They at first entered administration on the 20th of April 2018, with Norwegian local transporter Walnaljor flying the E190 E2. So the E2 family are something of newcomers. The family is comprised of three variations, in particular the E175 E2, the previously mentioned E190 E2, and the biggest variation, the E195 E2. They generally accompany the fuel-productive Pratt and Whitney PW1900G turbofan motors and offer a similar Forabas slender body fuselage. Despite the fact that with various lengths, the E175 E2 jetliner is the littlest of the family with a limit of just around 90 travelers. The original of this variation ended up being well known with the space territorial transporters. However, improvement of the new age variation has been placed on hold for undisclosed OSID reasons. The E190 E2 is next, and this airplane can situate up to 114 travelers in a solitary class setup. It moreover has a scope of around 2,900 nautical miles, as well as the most noteworthy wingspan proportion of any airplane, with an element of 11. Lastly, we have the E195 E2, which is the first E195 stretched out by 3 seat pushes. This airplane is the biggest, what's more, generally well known of each of the three, and can oblige up to 146 travelers in a single-class arrangement because of its bigger size contrasted with the E190 E2. It accompanies a marginally lower scope of 265 nautical miles on paper. The specs of these airplanes aren't anything. As a matter of fact, exceptional when contrasted with contending airplane like the Boeing 777-200 or Airbus A220. Yet they truly do have a few vital advantages that give them a benefit. When contrasted with other airplane beginning with a productivity, the Pratt & Whitney unadulterated power gear superfans have supplanted the General Electric motors from the prior age, EATs. This has given the E2 jetliners a revealed 17.3% lift in proficiency, contrasted with the past age, and a 16% execution support against similar airplanes. Those are significant figures for aircrafts hoping to save costs on fuel consumed. As a matter of fact, the E2 is promoted to be the most fuel-effective airplane under 1,550 seats in the market. The E2 airplanes are additionally Earth-agreeable in that they're intended to concede as little CO2 as conceivable by supplanting the bigger and less proficient airplanes with the more modest, however enough estimated E2 jetliners. Aircrafts could lessen their fossil fuel byproducts by as much as 30%. The utilization of supportable avionics fuel is something the flight industry has been intending towards for some time now, as they go for the gold maintainable air travel. Fortunately for carriers the second era, EET series through the E195E2 has as of now effectively finished a 100% supportable avionics fuel flight test. So there's high manageability benefits with this one, regardless of coming more modest than contending airplane. The E2 jetliners are still very roomy on the inside. This is thanks to the one-of-a-kind lodge arrangement, which doesn't forfeit traveler solace for moved-along execution or cost investment funds. Another colossal benefit of the E2 airplanes is that they can work air terminals that have explicit constraints like restricted or short runways. This is thanks to a button in the cockpit exclusively devoted to making steep methodologies. So they're well appropriate for those segregated island occasion trips. Lastly, these airplanes are really tranquil. They're seemingly the most calm airplanes available and contrasted with a contending airplane like the A220. It produces around 11% less commotion for certain air terminals having clamor limitations. This could prove to be useful for various aircrafts. These advantages all look great. Yet the explanation carriers could have to do a switch goes a little more profound than that. You see, a large group of European countries are truly pushing for a lower carbon impression and are making an honest effort to help the environment. Their push for a greener future has too impacted the avionics business, and that environment regulations influencing them are being thought upon to guarantee better natural practices. Nations such as France are pushing to boycott short lobby trips across areas which could be rather connected by rail inside 2.5 hours or less. This is a fascinating recommendation as 17 of the 20 most active air courses in Europe cover distance of less than 450 miles, which would fall into this class. New rapid rail lines connecting European countries are supposed to make short lobby flights repetitive across Europe. Even the Dutch aren't forgotten about, as the Netherlands Advanced Court has moreover pushed for plans to decrease the yearly flight limit of the Amsterdam Air Terminal by over 10% by 2024. The point of the decision was to lessen clamor contamination and fossil fuel byproducts, consequently assisting the country with meeting its environment objectives anyway. The decision was met with reaction from different carriers, as a regulation like that could demolish, particularly on more modest carriers. Restricting the yearly limit would influence more modest carriers who are attempting to associate with driving European centers, since they would face critical challenges getting flight openings. Greater carriers with bigger planes could just rearrange their ability to satisfy, proceeded with need, or they could simply trade openings with their accomplice aircrafts if accessible. Another illustration of an administration pushing for further developed environment objectives is Belgium. Belgian specialists are apparently set to present another expense on certain airplanes, like more seasoned and noisier ones, as well as confidential planes in short corridor business administrations. Just 12% of flights that land in Belgium are nearby. So this charge is set to influence a ton of carriers who stop by customary L in Belgium, with air contamination and fossil fuel byproducts being burdened. More nations are supposed to continue in this course, and aircrafts will be tired of keeping up with their more seasoned and noisier airplanes because of the additional expenses they could cause during movement. These strategies being formed upon in these countries would just push aircrafts towards all the more harmless to the ecosystem flying, and could be an impetus to presenting a new wave of feasible air travel, which the Embraer E2 jetliners would unquestionably benefit from. The E2 jetliners may be moderately youthful. However, as aircrafts move towards causing less damage in the world, their prominence has ascended over the past several years. They conveyed 62 airplanes in the main portion of 2023, with 47 coming in the second quarter alone, which is a 47% increment over the equivalent period. As last year, it's vital to note that they conveyed 113 airplanes in the final part of 2022. So the last 4 quarters have seen extremely positive development for Embraer. They've additionally declared that they've booked orders from carriers like American carriers, Spain's BTE or Canaris, SGAS Aviation Routes, Imperial Jordanian carriers. Thus, considerably more American carriers marked in request for 7E175E2S to be worked by their auxiliary agent Air, which plan to become their EET Armada by an extra 140 toward the finish of 2024. So assuming you were contemplating whether the E2 planes would be worth it, There's your response as the world keeps on recuperating from the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. It appears, Andre, or have incredible possibilities with their E2 contributions. Asia is one district they could truly prevail in, as the interest in air travel has sensibly shot up when contrasted with the remainder of the world. Their limit and productivity is appropriate for the center market, which is truly famous in Asia, and particularly nations like India and Singapore. They're, moreover, looking towards China, who could confront issues with Airbus and Boeing if international strains continue between them and the West. The fundamental focus point here is that with supportability, presently a critical figure, the flight industry, we could anticipate a blast for the E2 jetliners over the approaching years. Do you likewise concur that aircrafts will require the Embraer E2 later on? Or then again, do Airbus and Boeing have enough to, indeed, disregard a contender? Please tell us in the remarks beneath.